woman dies sees terrifying truth about what dead people are doing right now. The monitor's shrill alarm pierced through the emergency room as my own heart stopped beating. Through dimming vision, I watched my best friend Emma's face contort with panic as she shouted orders. My body lay there on the cold floor of Seattle General's ear, but somehow I was also watching it all unfold from above. Starting compressions. Get the crash cart now, Emma's voice cracked as she began CPR, her nun's habit swaying with each desperate push on my chest. Don't you dare leave us, Cecilia, don't you dare. I wanted to tell her I was fine, that I felt no pain anymore, but my voice wouldn't come. The scene below was chaos, nurses rushing, equipment clattering, prayers being whispered. Emma's tears fell onto my lifeless face as she continued compressions, her rosary beads clicking against her wrist with each movement. Father in heaven, please, she prayed between breaths, not her, not today. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Cecilia Matthews, the notorious atheist author of Faith, Humanity's Greatest Delusion, being prayed over by my best friend, a Catholic nun turned nurse. If I could have laughed, I would have. Through the chaos, I spotted my husband Nathan stumbling into the ER, his eyes wild with fear and drug-induced haze. He collapsed against the doorframe, trembling. Please, not like Timothy, he sobbed. I can't lose her like we lost him. The mention of our son's name sent a wave of emotion through whatever was left of me. Timothy, my beautiful 5-year-old boy, taken by cancer despite all our prayers, all our hopes. His death had sealed my disbelief in any higher power, had driven Nathan to drugs, had torn our family apart. No pulse, someone shouted. Starting the second round. Emma's voice grew stronger, more determined. The Lord is my shepherd, she began reciting, her hands never stopping their rhythmic compressions. I shall not want. I felt a gentle tug upward, away from the scene below. A warmth began to envelop me, and somewhere in the distance I heard a child's laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in 3 years, not since Timothy left us. Come, Mommy, the voice called. There's so much I need to show you. And so began the journey that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the power of faith. As I share my extraordinary journey between life and death, I invite you to join me by subscribing to this channel. Every story of faith and transformation deserves to be heard and shared with others seeking light. I never planned to become the most hated atheist in Seattle. Before my world shattered, I was just another trauma nurse at Seattle General, focused on saving lives through science and skill rather than prayers and miracles. My parents raised me Catholic, but years of seeing suffering in the ER had stripped away any faith I once held. How could a loving God allow such pain? I chose medicine because it offered concrete answers, clear protocols, measurable results, tangible hope. Then Timothy came into our lives, our beautiful boy with his father's dark curls and my stubborn determination. Nathan and I were young, ambitious, and absolutely in love with our son. I cut back my ear shifts to spend more time with him. Nathan's architecture firm was taking off. We had everything until the day Timothy started bruising too easily, until the fatigue that wouldn't go away, until the diagnosis that shattered our perfect world, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We fought hard. I researched every treatment option, consulted every specialist. Nathan and I took turns sleeping in the hospital chair beside Timothy's bed. My mother brought her prayer group to the hospital chapel daily. Emma, my closest friend since nursing school who had recently become a nun, spent countless hours praying with Timothy while I worked extra shifts to pay for experimental treatments. For 18 months, we watched our son fade away. Each round of chemotherapy took more of his spirit, but he never lost his smile. It's okay, Mommy, he would say. Jesus is holding my hand. I wanted to scream. Where was Jesus when the cancer spread? Where was God when my 5-year-old spent his last birthday attached to machines? Where was divine mercy when Timothy took his final breath, his tiny hand clutched in mine? The day we buried Timothy, I buried my faith too. Nathan turned to drugs to numb his pain. I turned to anger. I wrote Faith, Humanity's Greatest Delusion in a fury of grief, pouring all my bitterness onto its pages. The book became a bestseller, making me a hero to atheists and a demon to believers. I didn't care. I used my platform to debate religious leaders, to challenge faith healers, to expose what I saw as the cruel, false hope of religion. Emma was the only believer who stayed in my life, though God knows I tried to push her away too. She would show up at our house with groceries when Nathan was too high to function, with coffee when I couldn't sleep, with quiet love when I raged against her God. "Your anger is a prayer too," she would say. "God is big enough to handle it." But I didn't want God to handle anything. I wanted my son back. I wanted my husband sober. I wanted the life we had before cancer stole everything. Instead, I threw myself into my work, taking the hardest cases in the air, staying late to avoid going home to Nathan's addiction. I became known as the nurse who wouldn't pray with dying patients, who would shut down any mention of miracles or divine intervention. My parents stopped inviting us to Sunday dinners. Nathan's family blamed my atheism for his addiction. Even my colleagues walked on eggshells around me, especially after my book gained attention. Only Emma seemed unfazed, continuing to wear her habit and cross while working beside me in the ER. "God hasn't given up on you," she would say, "and neither have I." I thought I had it all figured out. I was the rational one, the realist, the one brave enough to face the harsh truth that we're alone in an indifferent universe. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how dramatically my certainty was about to be shaken to its core. No idea that my journey back to faith would begin with my own death on the ER floor, or that my guide would be the very soul I had lost. My marriage to Nathan wasn't always broken. We met in college. He was the charming architecture student who kept accidentally running into me at the campus coffee shop. Our love story was straight out of a romance novel until it became a tragedy. Now, our once beautiful Victorian home had become a battlefield of shattered promises and addiction. The night before my cardiac arrest, I found Nathan passed out on Timothy's bedroom floor again, clutching our son's favorite stuffed dinosaur. Empty pill bottles scattered around him like fallen soldiers. It was the third overdose this month. I should have felt something: fear, anger, desperation. Instead, I just felt numb as I called 911 again, administered Narcan again, watched him gasp back to life again. I saw him. Celia. Nathan slurred as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance. I saw our boy. He's waiting for us. It wasn't the first time he'd claimed to see Timothy during an overdose. I used to argue, to shake him, to scream that our son was dead and no amount of drugs would bring him back. Now I just signed the hospital admission papers and went back to work. Emma found me in the hospital chapel at dawn, not praying, just sitting in the dark. She didn't say anything about Nathan, didn't offer platitudes or prayers. She just sat beside me, her habit rustling softly as she took my hand. After 20 years of friendship, she knew when I needed silence. "I got a letter from my publisher today," I finally said. "They want me to write another book. Faith in the Age of Science, a critical analysis, more ammunition for the angry atheist brand I've built." "And what does your heart say about that?" Emma asked softly. "My heart," I laughed bitterly. "My heart died with Timothy. All I have left is logic, reason, and a husband who's trying to drug himself into seeing ghosts." Emma turned to face me, her eyes fierce with an emotion I couldn't read. "You know what I see, Cecilia? I see a woman so afraid of feeling pain that she's convinced herself she feels nothing. I see a brilliant mind that's forgotten its connection to a loving soul. I see my best friend building walls so high that even God's grace needs a ladder." "Don't," I warned, "don't turn this into another sermon about God's mysterious ways." "It's not a sermon, it's the truth. You're dying inside, Celia, just like Nathan is dying outside. The difference is, he's still looking for Timothy, while you're pretending our boy never existed." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "How dare you?" "I held our son while he died. I watched cancer eat him alive while your God did nothing. I listened to him ask if Jesus would have dinosaurs in heaven, and then I had to bury him in the ground. Don't you dare tell me I'm pretending he didn't exist." "Then why did you pack away all his photos? Why did you paint over his bedroom walls? Why do you leave the room every time someone mentions his name?" Emma's voice was gentle but relentless. "You're not protecting yourself from pain, Celia. You're denying yourself healing." I stood up so quickly my chair crashed backward. Healing? Is that what Nathan's doing with his pills? Is that what my parents are doing with their prayers? Is that what you're doing with your vows and your cross and your endless faith in a God who lets children die? "No," Emma said quietly. "That's what love does. Even when it hurts. Even when we don't understand. Even when we're angry enough to write books about how much we hate it. Love stays. Love waits. Love hopes." I wanted to scream at her, to shake her faith loose, to make her feel the raw emptiness that had become my constant companion. Instead, I found myself sinking to my knees, sobs tearing from my throat for the first time since Timothy's funeral. Emma knelt beside me, her arms strong around my shaking shoulders, her whispered prayers mixing with my cries. Neither of us knew that in less than 12 hours my heart would stop beating on the ER floor. Neither of us could have imagined that my journey back to faith would begin with death itself. And neither of us understood that Emma's presence in my life was far more than friendship. It was divine intervention, wearing surgical scrubs and a habit. That morning in the ER started like any other, except everything felt slightly off kilter. Maybe it was my argument with Emma in the chapel, or another night of worrying about Nathan, but something felt different in the air. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the monitors beeping more insistent. Even the coffee in my cup tasted bitter with foreboding. Room 4 held Mr. Anderson, terminal cancer patient, his family gathered around his bed like mourners at a premature funeral. Emma was already there when I entered, her habit swaying gently as she checked his vitals. His wife clutched a well-worn Bible, lips moving in silent prayer. Their teenage daughter caught my eye, her face a mirror of my own grief 3 years ago. Mrs. Matthews, Mrs. Anderson called out, her voice trembling. "Would you pray with us? Emma says you're one of the best nurses here, and James, he's slipping away." I felt Emma tense beside me, knowing what was coming. This was my reputation now, the atheist nurse, the one who wrote that book, the one who'd lost her faith along with her son. "I'm here to monitor your husband's condition, Mrs. Anderson. Emma can lead the prayers." "Please," the daughter whispered. "Dad always said prayer is stronger in numbers." My response was mechanical, rehearsed from countless similar requests. "I respect your beliefs, but I can't pretend to pray when I don't believe. It would be dishonest to your father and your faith." "Like you were dishonest in your book," Mr. Anderson's voice was weak but clear. "I read it, you know, your anger at God for taking your boy. But hatred doesn't heal, Mrs. Matthews. It just makes the pain deeper." The room went silent. Even the monitors seemed to hold their breath. Emma touched my arm gently, but I pulled away. "Mr. Anderson, I'm not here to discuss theology. I'm here to make you comfortable and manage your pain." "What about the soul's pain?" he pressed. "What about your pain?" "My pain is none of your concern." My voice came out sharper than intended. "Now, let me check your morphine drip." I saw him too. You know, Mr. Anderson's words stopped me cold. "You're Timothy. In my last near-death episode. Such a beautiful boy with those dark curls. He wanted me to tell you something." My hands started shaking so badly I had to grip the bedrail. Don't you dare use my dead son to push your agenda." He said, "Tell my mommy I'm okay. Tell her Jesus really does have dinosaurs in heaven." The world tilted sideways. Those words Timothy's last question before the cancer took him. Nobody knew about that except Nathan, Emma, and me. I'd never included it in my book or interviews. "You're hallucinating," I managed to say, but my voice sounded distant, strange. "The morphine." "He's been waiting for you," Mr. Anderson continued, his eyes growing distant. He says it's almost time, that you'll understand soon." "That's enough," I snapped, turning to Emma. "Get a psych consult in here. The medication is clearly causing delusions." Emma's face was pale. "Celia, maybe we should." "No, I won't stand here and let a dying man use my son's memory to manipulate me into some deathbed conversion. I'm going to get Dr. Harris to adjust your medication, Mr. Anderson. Clearly, the current dosage is too high." As I stormed toward the door, Mr. Anderson called out one last time, "He forgives you, you know, for packing away his photos, for painting over his dinosaur walls, for trying to forget. He understands you're just hurting, and he loves you so much." I fled the room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Behind me I could hear Emma making apologies, could hear Mrs. Anderson praying louder now, could hear the daughter crying softly. I made it to the supply closet before my legs gave out. Those details, those private, precious, painful details that nobody could have known. My hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone to call Nathan, then stopped. What would I say? That a dying man was somehow channeling our dead son? That Timothy was sending messages about dinosaurs in heaven? I looked at my reflection in the small mirror we kept for checking eye responses. The woman staring back looked haunted, stretched too thin between grief and disbelief. "Get it together," I whispered to myself. "You're a woman of science. This is just grief and morphine and manipulation." But even as I said the words, something deep inside me began to crack. I didn't have time to process Mr. Anderson's words because that's when the pain hit. At first it was just discomfort, a tightness in my chest that I attributed to stress. I'd been under so much pressure lately, Nathan's addiction, the publisher's deadline, and now this unsettling encounter. But then came the real pain, searing through my chest like molten steel. The supply closet suddenly felt too small, too airless. I reached for the door, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. The pain spread down my left side, up into my jaw. My medical training kicked in. I knew these symptoms, had treated them countless times. Heart attack. But I was only 31, too young, too healthy. "Emma," I tried to call out, but my voice was barely a whisper. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I caught a glimpse of my reflection again, face gray, lips turning blue. The irony wasn't lost on me, dying in a supply closet after running away from a conversation about death and faith. The crash cart was just outside in the hallway, if I could just reach it. But my legs buckled. Medical supplies rained down around me as I clutched at a shelf for support. Boxes of gauze, packets of syringes, all clattering to the floor like a strange percussion accompanying my collapse. Through the small window in the door, I saw Emma exit Mr. Anderson's room. She was looking down at her charts, unaware that her best friend was dying mere feet away. I wanted to bang on the door, to scream for help, but my body wouldn't obey. The pain was everywhere now. "Timothy," I whispered, surprising myself. After 3 years of avoiding his name, why call for him now? But in that moment of crisis, facing my own mortality, all my carefully constructed walls began to crumble. I thought of Nathan, probably still sleeping off last night's overdose. Would he even remember our last conversation? Would he survive losing me too? Emma was walking past the closet now. "Please look up," I silently begged. "Please see me." As if hearing my thoughts, she paused. Through dimming vision, I watched her head turn toward the door. Our eyes met through the small window, and I saw the moment recognition turned to horror. The door burst open. "Cecilia." Oh God, no! Emma caught me as I fell forward, easing me to the floor among the scattered medical supplies. Her hands were steady as she checked my pulse, but her voice shook as she screamed for help. "Code blue. Supply closet. I need a crash cart now." The pain was fading now, replaced by a strange lightness. Emma's face swam above me, her habit's veil brushing my cheek as she started compressions. "Stay with me, Celia. In the name of Jesus, you will not die today." "Tell Nathan," I tried to say, but the words wouldn't come. What would I tell him anyway? That I was sorry? That I loved him despite everything? That I finally understood his desperate need to see our son again? The room was filling with people now, doctors, nurses, faces I'd worked with for years. Someone was cutting open my scrub top, attaching defibrillator pads. Dr. Harris appeared, barking orders. Through it all, Emma kept praying, her voice a constant thread in the chaos. "Remember that time in nursing school," she said between compressions, "when we promised to be old ladies together? You don't get to break that promise to Cecilia Matthews. You don't get to leave me here alone." I wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that she had her faith, her God, her calling. But the light was fading, the voices growing distant. The last thing I heard was Emma's voice, no longer praying but singing the lullaby I used to sing to Timothy during his chemotherapy treatments. Then came the moment I'd written about, argued about, the moment of separation. 1 second I was lying on the supply closet floor, and the next I was floating above my own body, watching Emma fight for my life. But unlike the clinical descriptions in my research, this felt real, immediate, and absolutely terrifying. Because now I could see what Emma couldn't: Timothy standing in the doorway exactly as he looked before the cancer took him, holding out his small hand and smiling. "Come on, Mom," he said. "There's so much you need to understand." The journey toward Timothy wasn't like anything I'd researched or debunked in my books. There was no spinning tunnel, no cliché bright light at the end, just my son's hand in mine, warm and real and alive in a way that defied all scientific explanation. His small fingers wrapped around mine, just as they had in his final moments, but now without the weakness of disease. "I've missed you so much, Mommy," Timothy said, his voice exactly as I remembered, that perfect mix of mischief and innocence. "There's someone really important who wants to meet you." Below us, I could still hear Emma's desperate prayers mixing with the organized chaos of the code team. Dr. Harris was calling for more epinephrine, someone was counting compressions, and through it all, Emma kept singing our lullaby. But Timothy's presence drew me away from the scene, toward something I couldn't yet see. "What about Daddy?" I asked, suddenly remembering Nathan. "He needs me, Timothy. He's so lost without you." Timothy's smile held a wisdom far beyond his 5 years. "Daddy sees me sometimes when he takes those bad medicines. That's why he can't stop. He's trying so hard to reach me. But that's not the right way. You're both going to learn that soon." We moved through the hospital walls as if they were mist, past rooms filled with the sick and dying, past doctors and nurses rushing to save lives, past families praying and grieving and hoping. In each room I saw something I'd never noticed before: shimmering figures standing guard, offering comfort to those who couldn't see them. "Angels," Timothy explained, following my gaze. "Like Emma." Emma. But my mind struggled to process what he was saying. "A nun?" "A nurse. Your best friend," Timothy giggled. "She's all of those things, but she's also been your guardian angel since the day I died. God knew you'd need extra love." We stopped in the hospital chapel, now empty except for the eternal flame flickering before the crucifix. It was here that Emma had found me just hours ago, here where I'd broken down for the first time in years. The morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows on the floor. "He's here," Timothy whispered, his hand tightening in mine. I expected thunder, bright lights, something dramatic. Instead, there was just a presence filling the small chapel with such overwhelming love that I fell to my knees. It wasn't a physical form, more like pure love given consciousness, pure mercy given form. "Welcome home," Cecilia's voice said, though not in words. It resonated through my entire being, filling all the empty spaces grief had carved inside me. "You've carried such pain, my child." "You took him from me," I whispered, tears falling freely now. "You let him suffer. You let him die." "No, Mommy," Timothy said softly. "He gave me to you. Every day we had together was a gift. And when the cancer came, he cried with you, held you even when you pushed him away." The presence enveloped me, and suddenly I was seeing memories, not just experiencing them, but truly seeing them. I saw myself sleeping beside Timothy's hospital bed, and there was Jesus holding us both. I saw Nathan stumbling home drunk, and there was Christ walking beside him, catching him when he fell. I saw Emma praying over my sleeping form in the break room, her true angelic nature shimmering just beneath her human disguise. "Your anger was justified," the voice said. "Your pain was real. But Cecilia, it's time to let go of the bitterness. Time to see the bigger picture." "I don't understand," I said. "Why show me all this now? Why not when I was writing that book? Why not when Nathan started using drugs? Why not when we needed you most?" "Because you weren't ready to see," Timothy said simply. "Sometimes people have to be broken before they can be healed. Like the patients you take care of, sometimes the bone has to be reset before it can grow stronger." The presence grew warmer, more intense. "You have a choice to make, Cecilia. You can stay here with Timothy in perfect understanding and peace. Or you can go back knowing what you now know and help others find their way through the darkness." Below us, I could still hear Emma singing, her voice growing hoarse from exhaustion. "Time of death," Dr. Harris began to say. "Choose quickly," Mommy Timothy urged. "But choose with your heart, not your head. That's what Daddy needs to learn too." The choice before me felt impossible. Here was my son, whole and healthy, offering me an eternity of peace. Here was the divine presence I'd spent years denying, offering understanding beyond anything my scientific mind could grasp. And yet, "Emma," I whispered, watching my friend below continuing compressions long after others would have given up. She never lost faith in me, even when I mocked everything she believed in. Like the father waiting for his prodigal son, the presence said gently. Emma understood that sometimes the longest journeys lead us home. Then I saw Nathan rushing into the ER, his eyes wild with both drug haze and desperation. He collapsed beside my body, his hands shaking as he touched my face. "Not her too," he sobbed. Please, God, not her too. I'll do anything. I'll get clean. I'll go to rehab. Just don't take her like you took Timothy." "He means it this time," Mommy Timothy said softly. "But he can't do it alone." The presence surrounded me again, and suddenly I was seeing future possibilities, paths that could be taken, lives that could be changed. I saw Nathan in a rehabilitation center, clutching a Bible instead of a pill bottle. I saw myself beside him, both of us leading support groups for grieving parents. I saw Emma, her angelic nature now visible to me, continuing to guide us both. "Your book caused much pain," the presence said, "but without condemnation. Many read your words and lost hope. But think of how many could find hope again if you shared what you've seen here." "A second chance," I murmured. "But how can I go back? How can I face all the people I hurt with my anger? How can I explain this change?" Timothy squeezed my hand. "The same way I faced the scary machines in the hospital, one day at a time, holding hands with the people who love us." Below us, Emma had started reciting the Divine Mercy Chaplet, her voice carrying above the chaos. "For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world." "She's not just praying for you," Timothy explained. "She's praying for Daddy, for all the people who read your book, for everyone who's lost their way. That's what angels do. They never stop hoping, never stop loving." The presence grew warmer. "Your science wasn't wrong, Cecilia. It just wasn't complete. You saw the body but missed the soul. You measured brain waves but missed consciousness. You studied death but missed eternal life." Nathan's voice rose in a broken prayer, his first since Timothy's death. "I don't know if you're there, God. I don't know if you care. But if you give her back to me, I swear I'll find out." "He'll need you," Timothy said. "Just like you needed Emma. Sometimes the strongest souls are given the hardest battles so they can help others fight their way through." I looked at my son, memorizing his face, his smile, the way his curls fell across his forehead. "Will I see you again?" "I never left, Mommy. I've been with you and Daddy all along. You just couldn't see me through the pain. But now you will." The presence spoke one last time. "This is what grace looks like, Cecilia, not a reward for perfect faith, but a gift for those who need it most. Are you ready to receive it?" I looked at Emma, still fighting for my life. At Nathan, finally ready to fight for his own. At Timothy, safe and whole in the divine love I'd denied for so long. The choice crystallized with sudden clarity. "Yes," I whispered. "Send me back." Timothy's smile lit up the chapel. "Tell Daddy about the dinosaurs in heaven. Tell him I've been keeping his seat warm in Narcotics Anonymous. Tell him." But his words faded as I felt myself being pulled back, drawn down by Emma's prayers and Nathan's promises and the insistent rhythm of the defibrillator. The last thing I heard was the presence's voice, gentle as a father's embrace. "Welcome back to life, my child. This time live it fully." "She's back," Emma's voice broke through the darkness. "We've got a pulse." Returning to my body felt like being squeezed through a narrow tunnel. Every nerve ending screamed in protest, every breath burned. But through the pain, I could still feel Timothy's warmth lingering on my hand, could still hear the echo of that divine voice in my soul. The next few days in the cardiac unit became a blur of tests, medications, and visitors. My parents came, clutching their rosaries and trying not to look too hopeful when I asked them to pray with me. My publisher called, concerned about deadlines but more worried about the rumors that his star atheist author had experienced a divine encounter. Emma never left my side, somehow managing to be both my nurse and my guardian angel without anyone noticing the difference. Now that I knew her true nature, I could sometimes catch glimpses of her other form, a shimmer of light when she thought no one was looking, a faint glow around her hands as she adjusted my IV. "You knew," I said one night when we were alone. "All these years you knew what you really were." She smiled, adjusting her habit with familiar grace. "I chose this form, this life, because I knew you'd need someone who could walk beside you in your darkness, someone who understood both heaven and earth. All those times you saved me." I remembered the night after Timothy's funeral, when I'd stood on the hospital roof, looking down. How Emma had happened to find me there. "Guardian angels can't interfere with free will," she explained. "We can only offer guidance, support, love. The choices were always yours." "And Nathan? Does he have?" "Everyone has a guardian angel, Cecilia. But some people build walls so high that even divine love has to wait patiently outside. She took my hand, her skin warm with otherworldly energy. Speaking of Nathan, he's been in the rehabilitation center for 3 days now. No drugs, no alcohol, just prayers and determination. I closed my eyes, remembering Timothy's words about his father. He saw him too, didn't he? During his overdoses. Glimpses Emma confirmed. But without context, without understanding, those glimpses just drove him deeper into addiction. He was trying to break through the veil by force, instead of letting love guide him through. A soft knock interrupted us. Mr. Anderson stood in the doorway, looking far more alive than he had a few days ago. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "But your boy insisted I come." I sat up straighter, my heart monitor beeping faster. "You can see him." Those of us close to the veil often can. Cancer's a heavy curtain, but it lets some light through. He moved closer, his hospital gown swishing softly. "Timothy wants you to know he's been practicing his dinosaur names. Says Jesus is a patient teacher." Tears filled my eyes. All those years of scientific certainty, of thinking I knew everything. "Science is just another way of glimpsing God's work," Emma said gently. "You weren't wrong to believe in it. You just stopped there instead of letting it lead you deeper." Mr. Anderson nodded, like trying to understand an ocean by studying a single drop of water. "The drop is real, it follows natural laws, but it's not the whole story." "I have to rewrite the book," I said suddenly. "Not to deny science, but to show how it's part of something bigger. To help others find their way without losing what they already know to be true." "That's why you were sent back," Emma smiled. "But first, there's someone else who needs your help finding his way home." As if on cue, Nathan appeared in the doorway, 3 days sober and shaking like a leaf. Our eyes met across the room, and in that moment I saw what Timothy had shown me all the times Nathan had almost reached through the veil, all the pain that had driven him to try. "I saw him," Nathan whispered. "When they were trying to bring you back, I saw our boy." Nathan's hands were shaking as he approached my hospital bed, his eyes clear for the first time in years. Emma quietly guided Mr. Anderson out of the room, but not before I caught the knowing look they shared. Even now, angels were orchestrating moments of grace. 3 days sober, Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Longest I've been clean," since he couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "Since Timothy. Since our world shattered. Since I turned to anger and he turned to drugs." "Sit with me," I patted the bed beside me. "Tell me what you saw." He perched carefully on the edge, mindful of my IV lines. "You'll think I'm still hallucinating. That's what all the counselors say when I talk about seeing him during overdoses." "Try me," I said softly. "I think you'll find I'm a lot more open to possibilities than I was a few days ago." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas, the ones with the glow-in-the-dark T-Rex. His curls were all messy, just like when he'd wake up from his afternoon naps. He looked so healthy. "Celia, no tubes, no bruises, no pain. And Jesus really does have dinosaurs in heaven," I whispered. Nathan's head snapped up. "How did you?" That was the last thing he asked before his voice broke. "You saw him too, didn't you? When your heart stopped." I took his trembling hand in mine. "I saw everything, Nathan. Every time you overdosed trying to reach him. Every tear you cried alone in his room. Every prayer you were too afraid to finish. I thought if I could just get high enough, I could break through whatever wall was keeping him from us." Nathan's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "But each time I got close, it was like looking through dirty glass. I could see him, but I couldn't reach him, couldn't hold him." "Because that's not the way," I said gently. "We can't force our way through the veil. We have to let love guide us through." "Love?" He laughed bitterly. "I haven't felt love since we lost him. Just pain, just emptiness." "That's not true." I squeezed his hand. "You loved him so much you were willing to die trying to reach him. But Nathan, he doesn't want us to die. He wants us to live, to heal, to help others who are as lost as we were." A nurse appeared with my evening medications, not Emma this time, but I could see our guardian angel watching from the hallway, her true form flickering just beneath her human disguise. "I signed up for the full rehab program," Nathan said after the nurse left. 90 days, they have grief counseling, spiritual guidance, everything, but I'm scared, Celia. What if I'm not strong enough? You won't be alone. I touched his face, feeling 3 days of stubble under my fingers. I'll be there every step of the way. We'll heal together this time instead of suffering apart. How can you forgive me? After everything I put you through? The same way Timothy forgives us both. The same way God never stopped loving us. Even when I was writing books denying his existence, I smiled through my tears. Grace isn't earned, Nathan. It's given freely, especially to those who think they deserve it least. He rested his forehead against our clasped hands. Will you tell me about him? What you saw, what he said. He's been keeping your seat warm at NDE meetings, I said, and Nathan's startled laugh was like music. And he wants you to know that the dinosaurs in heaven are even cooler than the ones in his books. For the first time in 3 years, we talked about our son without drowning in grief. We shared memories that made us laugh instead of cry. And as the evening light faded outside my hospital window, I saw Timothy standing in the corner, beaming at us both. Keep going, he mouthed silently. You're both doing so well. Emma returned as visiting hours ended, her nurse's badge gleaming like a small star. Time for rest, she said, helping Nathan stand on his still shaky legs. You've got a long journey ahead of you both. But a journey we'll make together, Nathan said, and the hope in his voice was better than any medicine. My recovery was progressing well, but the spiritual battle was just beginning. It started the night before my discharge, when darkness crept into my hospital room like an oily fog. Emma was off duty and Nathan was at his rehab facility. I was alone when the shadows began to move. Such a touching conversion, a voice hissed from the darkness. The famous atheist author finds God through a near-death experience. How? Predictable. The shadows coalesced into a form that made my heart race. It looked like me, but twisted, bitter, wearing the anger I'd carried for 3 years like a crown. You're not real, I whispered, reaching for the call button. But my hand passed right through it. Oh, I'm very real, my doppelganger smiled with teeth too sharp to be human. I'm the part of you that wrote that book. The part that helped thousands reject false hope and embrace rational thought. The part that's dying as you embrace this. Delusion. More shadows gathered, taking forms. I recognized readers who'd written to thank me for freeing them from religion, followers who'd quoted my work in debates, people who'd found strength in my rejection of faith. Think of them, the shadow me urged. Think of how betrayed they'll feel. Think of the damage you'll do to the cause of reason. Was one glimpse of an imagined heaven worth throwing away everything you built? It wasn't imagined, I said, but my voice shook. I saw Timothy. I felt God's love. Did you? Or did your oxygen-deprived brain create what you desperately wanted to see? You're a nurse, Cecilia. You know how death works. It's biology, chemistry, physics, nothing more. The shadows pressed closer, whispering doubts, reminding me of every argument I'd ever made against faith. Scientific papers I'd quoted, studies I'd cited, all the logical, rational reasons to reject the supernatural. Your son is dead, the shadow me said coldly, decomposing in the ground. No amount of wishful thinking will change that. Nathan's falling for the same delusion, trading drug addiction for religious addiction. Is that really better? I closed my eyes, trying to remember Timothy's smile, the warmth of divine love, but the darkness was so thick it seemed to cloud even my memories. Had it all been a hallucination? A dream born of desperation? Remember who you are, the shadows whispered. The voice of reason. The defender of truth. Don't throw it away for a comforting lie. My chest began to hurt again, my heart racing against my ribs. The medicine pump beeped in alarm as my vitals spiked. The shadows laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Stop fighting, they urged. Embrace the truth. Empty universe, meaningless existence, no divine plan. It's easier this way. No responsibility, no guilt, no impossible standards to live up to. Just when I thought I would drown in darkness, a quiet voice began to sing. Emma's voice, carrying our lullaby from somewhere distant. Light bloomed in the corner of the room, and there stood Timothy, holding not just Emma's hand, but Jesus too. Hi, Mommy, he said softly. The shadows are lying. Want to see why? Before the darkness could react, Timothy touched my forehead. Suddenly I could see the full impact of my book, not just those who'd found freedom from religious oppression, but those who'd lost their last thread of hope. Grieving parents who'd read my words and given up on ever seeing their children again. People who'd turned to drugs or suicide after deciding life had no meaning beyond the physical. Actions have ripples, Jesus said gently. But so does love. Watch. Another touch, and I saw the potential ripples of my new journey, people finding hope in my transformation, Nathan helping other addicts find recovery through faith, our story reaching those who struggled to reconcile science with spirituality. The darkness can only lie, Timothy explained. It can't create, can't love, can't offer real hope. That's why it's so angry. The shadow me screamed in rage, lunging forward only to pass through Timothy like smoke through sunlight. The other shadows wailed, their forms dissolving. You can't have her, the shadow me shrieked. She's mine. No, I said, finding my voice at last, I belong to love now. And love is stronger than fear. Light exploded from Timothy's hands, forcing the shadows back. But they weren't done fighting. They swirled into new shapes every patient I'd lost, every grieving parent I'd counseled to abandon hope, every reader who'd followed my path into darkness. You owe them, the shadows hissed. You led them here. Their blood is on your hands. That's where you're wrong, Emma's voice rang out as she burst through the door in her full angelic glory, her nurse's uniform transformed into flowing light, her wings spreading wall to wall. There's no debt that love can't pay. The shadows recoiled from her radiance but quickly regrouped. The guardian angel reveals herself at last, my doppelganger sneered. Tell me, where was your divine protection when Timothy was dying? Where was God's love then? Right beside me, I answered before Emma could. I see it now, every moment of Timothy's illness, every prayer I thought went unanswered. Love was there, holding us all, even when we couldn't feel it. Pretty words, the shadow spat. But they won't bring him back. They won't erase what you wrote. They won't heal the damage you've done. No, Jesus said quietly, but she can help light the way back for others. Every soul lost can be found. Every heart broken can be healed. That's why you're so desperate to keep her in darkness, because her light will help others find their way out. Timothy stepped forward, and I saw him as he truly was, not just my 5-year-old boy, but a soul perfected by divine love. Remember what you taught me, Mommy? About how dinosaur fossils tell us stories about the past. Your story can be like that, helping people understand things they couldn't see before. The shadows tried one last attack, taking the form of Nathan during his worst overdose. You'll lose him too, they threatened. Faith is fragile, one slip, one doubt, and he'll be back in our embrace. Better to keep him numb than watch him suffer false hope. But at that moment, Nathan's voice echoed through the room. He was praying at his rehab facility, his words carrying across the spiritual plane. God, help me be strong for her. Help me be the man my son can be proud of. Help me choose love over fear. You see, Emma's light grew brighter. Love isn't fragile at all. It's the strongest force in creation. Cecilia, show them what you learned in heaven. I closed my eyes, remembering the overwhelming love I'd experienced in that chapel beyond death. Letting it fill me, flow through me, I opened my heart to the shadows themselves. I forgive you, I said to my darker self. I forgive the pain that created you, the fear that fed you, the grief that gave you power. But you can't stay here anymore. This heart belongs to love now. No, the shadows screamed, but they were already beginning to fade. You can't just erase us. We're part of you. Not anymore, Timothy said firmly. Mommy chose light, like Daddy did. Like all those people you're afraid of losing will have the chance to do. The shadows made one final lunge, but Jesus stepped forward, and suddenly the room was flooded with a light so pure, so holy that no darkness could exist within it. I heard my doppelganger's last howl of rage turn into something like a sob of relief before it dissolved completely. As the light faded to a gentle glow, I found myself wrapped in Emma's wings, Timothy's small hand in mine, and the lingering warmth of divine love in my heart. The monitors had settled back to normal rhythms, and the room smelled of roses, the sign of divine presence I'd always scoffed at before. Well done, Emma whispered, her wings slowly fading as she resumed her human form. The hardest battles are always the ones we fight with ourselves. Will they be back, I asked, meaning both the shadows and my doubts. They may try, Jesus said gently, but they have no power except what fear gives them, and perfect love casts out fear. Timothy hugged me one last time before fading. You're ready now, Mommy. Ready to help Daddy. Ready to help others. Ready to let love write a new story. The hardest moment wasn't the battle with the shadows, it was walking into Nathan's rehab facility for our first joint counseling session. He was 30 days sober, the longest stretch since Timothy's death, but withdrawal had carved deep lines in his face that made him look ancient. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered as we sat in the counselor's office. Talk about him. About that day. The counselor, Dr. Sarah Bennett, had experience with grieving parents. She'd lost a child herself, she'd told us, and found her way back to life through faith and therapy. But nothing could have prepared any of us for the weight of the memories we had to face. Tell me about the last day, Dr. Bennett said gently. Not Timothy's last day, your last day as a family, before the diagnosis? The pain hit like a physical blow. Nathan grabbed my hand, his grip desperate. The Dinosaur Museum, he said hoarsely. We took him to the Dinosaur Museum for his 5th birthday. He was so excited, I continued, the memories flooding back. He wore his T-Rex costume the whole day, roaring at other kids, pretending to eat the plastic plants in the exhibits. Tell me more, Dr. Bennett encouraged. But Nathan was shaking, sweat beading on his forehead. I can't. I need. His eyes darted to the door, seeking escape, seeking drugs, seeking anything to numb the pain. Yes, you can. I squeezed his hand. Timothy's watching. He's here with us. Remember what you saw when my heart stopped. He's here. Nathan's eyes searched the room desperately. I can't see him. Why can't I see him? I used to see him when I was high. Maybe if I just... That's the addiction talking, Dr. Bennett said firmly. Stay with us, Nathan. Stay with the memory. He had ice cream, Nathan said suddenly, tears streaming down his face. Blue ice cream that turned his tongue blue. He kept sticking it out at us, laughing. I took a picture on my phone, but I deleted it after. The weight of all our mistakes crashed over us then. How we'd erased Timothy from our lives, me by packing away his things, Nathan by drowning in drugs, both of us running from the pain in different directions. We failed him, Nathan sobbed, our boy. We failed him. No, Dr. Bennett said quietly. You loved him through cancer. You held him through chemotherapy. You sang to him, read to him, made him laugh even when he was hurting. That's not failure. But after, I whispered, my book, your drugs, we let the pain turn us into people he wouldn't recognize. That's called grief, Dr. Bennett said. And yes, you both lost your way, but you're here now, together, fighting to find your way back. Nathan's withdrawal tremors were getting worse. His voice shook as he spoke. Sometimes I still want to die, to be with him. The cravings get so bad, and I think one last hit, one big enough to see him again. His confession broke something in me. I saw every time he'd overdosed, every time Emma had helped me find him in time, every moment we'd almost lost each other completely. Timothy doesn't want that, I said firmly. He told me himself. Those glimpses you got when you were high, they weren't real connection. They were him trying to stop you from killing yourself. Then why does it hurt so much? Nathan's voice was small, broken. Why can't I feel him like you do? Because you're still detoxing, Dr. Bennett explained. Not just from drugs, but from using them to numb your grief. Real healing hurts, Nathan. It has to. I looked to the corner where I could sense Timothy watching, his presence a soft glow that Nathan wasn't ready to see yet. Our boy nodded encouragingly, sending a wave of love that brought fresh tears to my eyes. Tell me more about the museum, Dr. Bennett prompted. Tell me about your son's blue tongue and his T-Rex costume. Tell me about the family you were before pain changed you. They're still in there, those people. We just have to find them again. As Nathan spoke about the museum, something inside him began to crack. His voice grew more frantic, the memories rushing out like a broken dam. I promised him, Nathan choked out. When the cancer came, I promised him we'd go back to the museum. I said, when you're better, buddy, we'll see all the dinosaurs again, but we never did. He never got better. And I couldn't even look at a dinosaur toy after that. Dr. Bennett handed him a tissue, but Nathan was beyond such small comforts. He was rocking now, emotion I remembered from Timothy's worst nights of pain. The day he died, Nathan continued, his voice raw. He asked me if there were dinosaurs in heaven. I said yes. I lied to my dying son because I didn't believe in heaven anymore. And then, Cecilia, you wrote that book telling everyone there was nothing after death, and I thought I'd lied to him for nothing. The guilt in his voice was unbearable. I could see Timothy in the corner, trying to send his father love, but Nathan's pain was too thick a wall to penetrate. I started using the next day, Nathan confessed. Found a dealer at the funeral. Told myself it was just to get through it. But then I saw him. High as hell, but I saw him. Playing with dinosaurs in a place so beautiful it had to be heaven. And I kept chasing that vision, trying to get back there, trying to apologize for lying. But you didn't lie, I interrupted. Nathan, look at me. You didn't lie to him. There are dinosaurs in heaven. Timothy told me himself. Jesus teaches him their names. Nathan's laugh was bitter, edged with hysteria. Now who's high? You sound like. Like someone who died and came back, Dr. Bennett suggested quietly. Like someone who's seen what you've been trying to reach through chemicals. It's not fair, Nathan whispered, his face crumpling. Why did you get to see him clearly? Why did you get proof? I'm his father. I'm supposed to protect him, provide for him, and I couldn't even. He doubled over, decades of suppressed grief finally breaking free. His scream was primal, a father's heart ripping open. The sound brought nurses running, brought Emma from her post down the hall, brought Timothy's presence so close I could almost feel him trying to hug his father. Daddy, Timothy whispered, though only I could hear him. Please don't hurt yourself anymore. Please. He wants you to stop hurting yourself, I relayed, holding Nathan as he shook. He loves you so much. He's proud of you for getting clean, he says. But Nathan pulled away violently. Stop, just stop. I can't hear about him being proud when I failed him. When I'm still failing him. When I still want the drugs more than I want. More than what Dr. Bennett pressed. More than life, Nathan shouted. More than faith. More than this pain that never fucking ends. I'm not strong like Cecilia. I can't just have some near-death experience and suddenly be healed. I'm still broken. I'm still lost. Still, his father, Emma said firmly, entering the room in full nurse mode, though I could see her angelic light shimmering beneath the surface. Still worthy of love. Still capable of healing. But Nathan was beyond reaching. The cravings, the grief, the guilt, it was all too much. He started scratching at his arms, a habit from his darkest days of addiction. I need a hit, he gasped. Please. Just one more. Just to see him once more. Please. As the nurses gently restrained him, as Dr. Bennett called for anti-anxiety medication, as Emma began to pray softly in the corner, I watched my husband shatter completely, and I finally understood some tragedies don't end with the death. Some keep unfolding, keep cutting deeper, until rock bottom becomes a false floor above an even deeper darkness. Stay with him, Timothy pleaded. Like you stayed with me through the chemo. Love has to be stronger than addiction, Mommy. It has to be. 3 days after Nathan's breakdown, I found him in the rehab facility's chapel. He was sitting in the back pew, holding something in his trembling hands. As I got closer, I saw it was his phone, and on the screen was the photo he'd said he deleted. Timothy's blue ice cream grin beaming up at us. I lied, he said without looking up. I never deleted it. Kept it hidden in a locked folder. Used to look at it when I got high, pretending I could reach through the screen and touch him one more time. I sat beside him, close enough to feel his withdrawal tremors, but not touching yet. The chapel stained glass cast colored shadows across Timothy's frozen smile. That's not the only thing you've been hiding, is it? I asked gently. Nathan's breath caught. How did you? Timothy told me. About your near-death experience. The one you never told anyone about. His hand started shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. I carefully took it from him, saving our son's smile from shattering on the chapel floor. It was my third overdose, he whispered. The one that put me in ICU for a week. I felt myself leaving my body, floating up, and there was this light. He stopped, swallowing hard. I never told you because you were so deep in writing that book. So sure there was nothing after death. I thought I was just hallucinating. But you weren't, I said softly. Tell me what you saw. Nathan closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. I saw him playing in this beautiful garden. There were dinosaurs everywhere, not scary ones, but gentle ones. He was riding on the back of a brontosaurus, laughing that laugh we thought we'd never hear again. Jesus was there, teaching him the scientific names of each species. He opened his eyes, looking at me desperately. I wasn't high that time, Celia. I was dying. And Timothy, he looked right at me and said, "Not yet, Daddy. You have to get better first. You have to help Mommy tell people about love." "But you didn't," I said. "You came back and went deeper into addiction instead." Because I was a coward, his voice echoed off the chapel walls. Because it was easier to get high, to pretend those glimpses were enough, than to face what he was really asking me to do. Easier than watching you destroy your faith while I secretly clung to mine. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those years I'd spent writing about the emptiness of faith, Nathan had been silently believing, suffering alone in his secret hope. "Every time you read passages from your book to me," he continued, "every time you went on TV to debate religious leaders, I wanted to tell you that heaven was real, that our boy was there, that Jesus himself was teaching him about dinosaurs. But I was too afraid. Afraid you'd think I was crazy, afraid you'd leave me, afraid to hope too much." "So you let me lead others away from hope," I said quietly, "while secretly carrying your own." "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I failed everyone. Failed Timothy by not getting clean when he asked me to. Failed you by not sharing the truth. Failed God by taking the coward's way out." "No," a voice said from the chapel doorway. We turned to see Emma standing there, her nurse's uniform glowing softly in the dim light. "You didn't fail. You were being prepared." She walked toward us, each step leaving tiny traces of light on the chapel floor. Sometimes God lets us carry secrets until the right moment, until they can be part of a bigger healing. "Like how you carried the secret of being an angel?" Nathan asked, and Emma stopped short in surprise. "You can see what I am." Nathan nodded. "Since that day in the ICU. Timothy showed me, said you'd be watching over us until we were ready to heal together." He turned to me, really looked at me for the first time since his breakdown. I think maybe we're finally ready." Emma sat down across from us, her angelic light dimming to a soft glow. "Tell her everything, Nathan. It's time." Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn notebook. "I've been writing to Timothy every day since that ICU experience. Every time I saw him during an overdose, every prayer I was too ashamed to say out loud, every truth I was too scared to share." He handed me the notebook with trembling hands. Opening it, I found pages and pages of a father's heart poured out in shaky handwriting. "Dear Timothy, overdosed again today. Saw you riding that blue triceratops. You begged me to stop killing myself. I'm trying, buddy. I'm trying. Dear Timothy, Mommy's book hit the bestseller list. She's so sure there's nothing after death. How do I tell her what I know? How do I tell her you're more alive than ever? Dear Timothy, Jesus showed up in my withdrawal dreams last night. Said you're learning paleontology from the best teacher there is. Made me laugh for the first time in years." The entries continued, year after year, page after page. Through my book tours, through his overdoses, through our crumbling marriage, Nathan had been documenting a secret spiritual journey that paralleled my public journey away from faith. "There's more," Nathan said quietly. He turned to the most recent pages written in the rehab facility. "I've been having visions, not drug-induced ones, real ones, about what we're supposed to do next." Emma nodded encouragingly. "Tell her what Timothy showed you." "He showed me us, you and me, running a center. A place where grieving parents and addicts could come together, where they could learn that it's possible to see their children again, but not through drugs or despair, through love, through faith, through healing." "The Timothy Project," Emma added softly, "a place where science and faith work together, where doctors and priests collaborate, where grief leads to growth instead of destruction." I looked up from the notebook, my vision blurring with tears. "That's why I was sent back, isn't it? And why you were kept alive through all those overdoses. We had to both hit bottom before we could build this together." "Your medical knowledge and my addiction experience," Nathan said. Your story of finding faith and my story of keeping it hidden. Even your book, all those people who followed you away from faith might follow me back, I finished. But Nathan, are you strong enough? You're still in early recovery. He smiled, and for the first time in years I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. I'm not doing this alone anymore. No more secrets. No more hiding. No more trying to reach heaven through chemicals. He took my hand. Timothy told me something during your cardiac arrest. He said, tell Mommy the dinosaurs are patient. They'll wait until you're both ready to see them together. Emma's light brightened as she stood. It's happening already. Look, through the chapel windows we could see other rehab patients gathering in the garden. Some were praying, some were crying, some were just sitting quietly in the sun. All of them, I realized, were carrying their own hidden hopes, their own secret pain. They're waiting, Emma said. All these broken souls, waiting for someone to show them how to heal. Waiting for someone who's walked through both darkness and light to lead them home. As if in response, Timothy's presence filled the chapel with warmth. Though Nathan couldn't quite see him yet, I felt his grip tighten as he sensed our son's love. The Timothy Project, he whispered, teaching others what our boy taught us, that love is stronger than death, that faith can survive doubt, that even the deepest wounds can heal. And that there are always dinosaurs in heaven, I added, making Nathan laugh through his tears. 1 year after my cardiac arrest, the Timothy Project opened its doors. We converted our old Victorian home, the one that had witnessed so much pain, into a sanctuary of healing. Nathan and I stood together on the front porch, watching as the first group of residents arrived. They came with their own stories of loss: a mother whose daughter died of leukemia, clutching a worn teddy bear; a father fighting addiction after losing his son to a car accident; a doctor who'd lost faith after too many children died under her care. Each one carrying grief like armor, doubt like weapons. Emma took a break from her hospital duties to help us that first day, her nurse's uniform and habit replaced by simple volunteer clothes. Though only Nathan and I could see her true angelic nature now, every resident commented on the peace they felt in her presence. Welcome to the Timothy Project, Nathan addressed the group, his voice strong and clear after 15 months of sobriety. I'm Nathan Matthews, and this is my wife Cecilia. You might know her as the author of Faith, Humanity's Greatest Delusion. He paused as recognition flickered across faces. But we're here to tell you a different story now. A story about how love transcends death and how healing happens in the most unexpected ways. I stepped forward, feeling Timothy's presence warm beside me. 3 years ago, we lost our son to cancer. I turned to atheism and angry writings. My husband turned to drugs. We thought we were choosing different paths, but we were both really running from the same pain. The residents sat in our living room, now a group therapy space surrounded by photos we'd finally brought out of storage. Timothy's smile beamed down at them from every wall, on with artwork from other children who'd left this world too soon. Then something happened, I continued. I died, just for a few minutes, and everything I thought I knew about death, about faith, about the universe itself, changed. Not because I stopped believing in science, but because I finally understood that science is just one way of seeing God's truth. A young woman in the front row, Jessica, barely 20, who'd lost both her child and her sobriety, raised her hand. I read your book, she said quietly. It helped me feel less crazy for being angry at God. How do you go from that to this? Nathan sat beside her, pulled out his old journal. By being honest about our journey. All of it, the anger, the doubt, the desperate attempts to numb the pain. But also the moments of grace, the glimpses of heaven, the way love keeps reaching for us even when we try to run away. The Timothy Project isn't about forcing faith on anyone, I explained. It's about creating space for grief and healing to coexist. Where doctors and counselors work alongside spiritual guides. Where we can question and doubt and rage, but also hope and believe and grow. Emma moved through the room, offering tissues, gentle touches, silent prayers. Near the window, visible only to me, Timothy played with a spectral dinosaur, showing off for the children. Only he could see the lost sons and daughters of our residents coming to support their parents' healing. Your children are not gone, I said softly, watching tears fall across tired faces. They're not lost in emptiness. They're more alive than we are, waiting patiently, loving us through our pain. We can't reach them through drugs or despair, but we can learn to feel their presence through love. And if you're not ready to believe that yet, Nathan added, that's okay too. Start with what you can believe in community, support, the courage to face each day sober. Let hope come in its own time. A father in the back spoke up, his hands shaking with withdrawal. How long? How long until it stops hurting? I met his eyes, seeing my own past pain reflected there. The hurt changes. It becomes less like a knife and more like a companion. Some days it reminds us how deeply we loved. Other days it shows us how far we've come. But here's what I've learned: every tear we cry is counted. Every prayer we can't voice is heard. And every step toward healing brings us closer to those we've lost. That evening, after the residents had settled into their rooms, Nathan and I sat on the porch swing where we used to rock Timothy to sleep. Emma had returned to her hospital duties, but her angelic blessing lingered in the air like the last notes of a lullaby. "Remember when we bought this house?" Nathan asked, his hand warm in mine. "We had such dreams. A room full of kids, family gatherings, growing old together." "We still can," I said softly, "just differently than we planned. Look how many children we have now, not just Timothy in heaven, but all these souls who need healing, all these parents who need hope." As if in response to my words, soft music drifted from one of the upstairs windows, Jessica, playing her lost daughter's favorite lullaby on a guitar she'd brought. One by one, lights came on in different rooms as other residents were drawn to the melody, gathering in the shared spaces, beginning to form the connections that would help them heal. "I need to show you something," Nathan said, pulling a manuscript from his jacket. "I've been working on it in rehab, my response to your first book." The title page read, "Finding Faith, a Father's Journey from Addiction to Grace." "It's beautiful," I whispered, scanning the first few pages. "Nathan, people need to read this. We'll publish them together, your new book about your near-death experience and my story of finding God through loss. Two paths to the same truth." As moonlight filtered through the porch screens, I sensed Timothy's presence growing stronger. Nathan felt it too. After months of healing, he was finally able to perceive our son's spirit without drugs or desperation. "Hi, Daddy." Timothy's voice came clear and sweet. "Hi, Mommy. Jesus says it's time." The air around us shimmered, and suddenly the veil between worlds seemed to thin. We saw them all, every child our residents were grieving, gathered in our front yard like a celestial playground. They were whole, healthy, radiant with divine love. And yes, there were dinosaurs, gentle giants letting children ride on their backs, just as Nathan had described from his vision. "This is what the Timothy Project really is," our son explained. "Not just a place for the living to heal, but a bridge between heaven and earth, where parents can learn to feel their children's presence, where love can flow freely between both sides of the veil." Jesus himself appeared then, gathering the children close, his love radiating outward to touch every grieving heart in the house. "Perfect love casts out fear," he reminded us. "And where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am also." "Tell them," Mommy, Timothy urged. "Tell them what you learned when you died. Tell them about the dinosaurs and the gardens and how much we love them." "I will, baby," I promised. "Every day, in every way I can. No more running from the truth." The vision faded gently, leaving behind a peace so profound that even our newest residents felt it. One by one, they drifted onto the porch, drawn by something they couldn't name but desperately needed. "Does it ever get easier?" Jessica asked, her guitar clutched like a shield. Nathan and I exchanged glances. Then he spoke with hard-won wisdom. "It gets different. The pain becomes purpose. The grief becomes a gift we can share. And love. Love becomes everything." I looked out at our front yard, now empty to human eyes but forever changed in our hearts. "Someone very wise once told me that actions have ripples," I said. "But so does love. Everything we do here, every heart we help heal, creates ripples of hope that reach all the way to heaven." "And heaven reaches back," Nathan added, his voice thick with emotion. "Through memories, through dreams, through moments of grace like this one." As the moon rose higher, casting silver light on our gathering, I felt the truth settle deep in my soul. This was why we'd survived my cardiac arrest, Nathan's overdoses, our journey through doubt and addiction and grief. Not just for our own healing, but to help others find their way back to love. Timothy's last whisper floated on the evening breeze. "The dinosaurs say good night, Mommy and Daddy. Keep helping people find their way home." Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If our story of love, loss, and redemption has touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and support our team's mission to share stories of hope and healing. Your comments and thoughts mean the world to us. What moments resonated with you? Have you experienced similar struggles with faith and loss? Share your story below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends and family who might need a reminder that love transcends death and that healing is always possible. Together we can spread hope and light to those who need it most.